The opinions of this podcast are my own and not necessarily the opinions of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate, any realtor associations, persons, or entities. If your property is currently listed with a real estate broker, please note that it is not our intention to solicit the offerings of other real estate brokers. Good morning, Rich. Thanks for joining me on what I'm sure is also a cold morning in the Des Moines greater area as it is in Omaha, Nebraska.
Very much so. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's like negative 20-something wind chill. So
when you wake up and there's frost on the inside of your windows, it's never a good sign. Probably a good day to have good insurance coverage, right?
Yeah. Inevitably, we're going to get some calls. There's going to be some pipes bursting today. So
yeah. So today, Rich Bales is joining me. I told Rich I'm going to introduce him by reading his Instagram bio. It says, helping luxury homeowners and business owners navigate insurance with modern processes. Bales Insurance Team at Phillips Stafford Insurance Group, Urbandale, Iowa. So, Rich, we have a mutual friend. We probably have more than one mutual friend, but our friend Jamie Nielsen gave us an introduction. I want to give her a shout out because Jamie's a close friend, and she said, hey, I was golfing with Rich, and I just felt like you guys would really hit it off, so you guys need to connect. And here we are like 6 months later, maybe even longer, connecting. So, Rich, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, winding it all the way back, I grew up mostly in Pella, Iowa. That's where, I spent most of my childhood. I bounced around a little bit before that, but I grew up an only child there. I've got 3 half sisters that they lived with my dad, which has been fun later in life, reconnecting with them. But had a pretty basic childhood there. Grew up, went off to Iowa State, where I was a Cyclone for 4 years, got the opportunity to run track there. So it was pretty cool. I got to see the country when I had really never been outside of Iowa prior to that. So really just kind of opened my eyes to, different people, different parts of the country, stuff like that, which was fun. From there, was pretty determined to go into being a physician. Funny enough, and in hindsight, I kind of look back at that, and I think the big draw of that was just stability. I just didn't know it yet. I had some pretty good examples in my life of people who were doctors and just the lifestyle they lived and the stability they had in their homes and things like that. And so when that didn't work out, there's a bunch of different things going on with family and stuff like that. Got really lucky, got introduced to somebody who was in medical device sales. One of the physicians I had been shadowing knew him and just said, hey, why don't you call this guy? His name's Troy Cush. If you're in the Omaha area, Cush 7-Day Furniture, shout out them. It's the same.
Okay.
So, so he was in medical device sales at the time. And they said, hey, this guy did it fresh out of college. You should just call him and pick his brain. So it wasn't even one of those like, hey, I'm looking for a job. It was more so like, I just want some perspective. Like, I didn't even know what this was. So ironically enough, him and I hit it off really fast. He ended up becoming one of my best friends, still is to this day. But I said, you know what? I think this is going to be the right move for me. So I jumped into that. Very quickly thereafter, probably 6 months, a year in, Troy steps aside, goes into his family business, and I'm kind of thrown into the fire. Like, hey, this is your territory now. You're going to run it. Was really fortunate. Had quite a bit of success. Kind of found a knack for what I was doing. I liked the nerdy side of it, where I could really kind of scratch that itch for myself because I loved the science, I loved the biomechanics, all that stuff. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to be educating and selling to these surgeons, where it was really creating an impact for people. So time went on with that. Eventually kind of worked my way up into more of a management role, took over more states, bigger team, stuff like that. Was really enjoying it. But along the way, my wife and I had gotten married. We had our first kid. And then I had also started investing in real estate on the side and kind of got a taste for what it would look like to maybe not have a W-2 job. Just a combination of things where there was an ownership change of that company, and maybe I didn't align quite as well with the new owners. Building a family. All of our family lived back in Iowa. One day, my wife and I, it was like, I don't know, probably our 3rd weekend in a row of driving back and forth for a birthday party or whatever it might be. I just threw it out there. I was like, should we just move to Des Moines? And like without hesitation, she goes, yep. And so I was like, okay, well, you've obviously put some thought into this. I've thought about this. Maybe we should just do it.
Yeah.
And so thus led the kind of kickstarting of, hey, I think I'm going to do something different because I saw what the long-term career of med device looked like and the burnout rates and the travel and all that stuff. So I just said, I think I need to do something different if I'm thinking about, 10, 15 years from now instead of just thinking about tomorrow. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I walked away from that career. I kicked around doing real estate because I was like, hey, I like doing these flips, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had been, I don't know, I'd been in a quota job forever, and kind of the thought of just starting over every year just didn't sit well with me anymore. Father-in-law is a financial advisor. He said, you should be an advisor. It's the end all be all. And I
Yeah.
didn't trust myself with my money. So I said, why would anybody else trust me with their money? And then he again was the one who said, you should explore insurance if you don't want to be a financial advisor. Just the business makes sense, the way it's built. And he's like, you're somebody who wants to build a team. You always enjoyed like the recruiting and the training part of your prior career. So just explore it. So thus started the journey of figuring out who carries my insurance. I didn't even know my insurance person. I just
Yeah.
had it and they took care of it. And that was about it. So I interviewed just about everywhere. I looked at State Farm. I looked at Farm Bureau, Country Financial, Allstate. And then my real estate agent introduced me to my current group that I'm with, Phillips Stafford Insurance Group. It was his agent. And it just gave me the freedom where I'm not really somebody who needed somebody to, wake me up in the morning and tell me to go do stuff. So it was sort of the perfect balance of, they are completely hands off. Even when it comes to training, it's kind of a self-taught, self-whatever, but that was perfect for me. So I took the leap, and then here we are 2.5 years later in the classic med device to insurance.
Yeah. A lot of people do that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the building block. So
I was really curious, just in our brief conversation before, you talked about investing in real estate, you making this transition. I really thought that you may have considered real estate, and I was really curious of why you didn't go that route. I mean, to me, there's a lot of similarities in kind of what you do on like a business basis,
yeah,
than, and why you didn't choose that. So that's interesting that you pointed that out.
yeah,
Funny you said, I didn't know your track background. I know you probably know the Bukites from Pella,
yeah,
right?
yep. Nathan was my age, and then
Okay.
Zach was a couple years younger.
I know Zach just from I ran cross country and track at Iowa Western,
Okay,
and then and I went to UNI, and I had a good friend that I lived with that was on the track team, and so I got to know a bunch of those guys, and
yeah.
it's a small world we live in.
I think maybe one of the Pingles too may have
Oh
been
yeah.
another Pella kid that was on the track team at UNI.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah, very small world.
yep,
So it's hard enough to transition your entire job and start over, and then especially in a job like real estate or insurance, it's like, how do you build your network when you're starting from ground zero, especially when you're moving to a new community? So what are some things that you did that you found success to build your business once you did that?
yeah. I mean, I think the thing I've gotten good at is taking something that somebody else has succeeded with or failed with and implementing it, right? So that entire first year, I've talked about this on a handful of podcasts, was just I set a goal for myself. I want to sit down with somebody every single day for the first year, for every business day. I ended up doing closer to 2 a day for that full year, whether it was a ton of real estate agents, financial advisors, mortgage lenders, business owners, whatever it was. I just wanted to figure out how did they become successful and how can I apply that to my job as an insurance agent? Because I struggled. I couldn't get a hold of other insurance agents because it was just like everyone kind of gave me that stiff arm of like, no, we're not in the business of like helping each other. We're competition. So
Yeah.
I learned that pretty fast. And then I was like, well, you know what? There's a lot of other successful people that I could probably learn things from. So as simple as it is, I think just activity was huge for me. Every day I was having conversations, which the goal wasn't really to like refine my talk or my speech or whatever, but organically that happened because I started to learn the things that got good answers out of people and like, lowered their guard enough to tell me why something worked or what really worked or what they were really looking for. And so in doing that, I think it really allowed me to differentiate myself in my conversations. Whereas, I think I can pretty accurately predict what most insurance agents go in and talk about when they sit down with a realtor or a mortgage lender or whatever it is. So um, it was a good way for me to learn how to, again, just differentiate myself, and
Mm-hmm.
also to challenge those people I was sitting with and going, okay, well, hey, in the, if I was talking to you, I'd say, okay, in the Omaha Council Bluffs metro, how many real estate agents are there? 3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, why you?
Yeah.
And most people, that is a pretty um, that's a good question. And
Yeah.
so unless you know that true value proposition, and maybe you don't have one, that's okay. But better to sort it out with me now than wait, right? And so then for myself, I knew I was like, okay, I bet if I was another insurance agent, no thoughts going into it, I would sit down with you and go, okay, well, I've got all these companies. Here's how I do my quotes. They're really fast. They're really cheap. And then most people are like, well, yeah, but that's fine. But that's a mortgage
Then
lender.
what?
If a
Yeah.
mortgage lender says yeah, well, I close on time. Yeah, cool. That's your
Mm-hmm.
job. If you're a realtor and
Mm-hmm.
say, well, yeah, well, I put it on the MLS. Awesome. That's what everybody does, right? And so
Yeah.
the answers I would always start to get back were oh, well, I care the most, or it was all these intangible things that I was like, that's not different because everybody can say it. So I was just really intentional about being I want to have a conversation I know you're probably not going to have somewhere else, and it's going to make you think. And I got good at that. And in doing it, I uncovered all these little tidbits of the biggest thing I think it rolled back to is really people care about is client experience, right? If you send me somebody, you want them to come back to you and be like, man, that Rich guy is dialed in. We got all these
Mm-hmm.
things we never would have had somewhere else. We understand it. We feel taken care of. And we're going to have a long-term partnership with them. And then, that just tees it up. So if someday they come to me and they're like, hey, we're starting to think about buying a house. We're curious what numbers look like. And I go, yeah, that's awesome. You should call Blake back because you're tagged in our system. And so it's just creating value in a completely different way that we felt wasn't really present in the market. So,
Yeah. And you mentioned when we talked before, one thing that was huge for you when you were, sorry, if I don't move enough, my office
that,
light shut off. One thing you mentioned when we were talking before, when you were investing in real estate was, one of the huge things that your real estate agent brought to the table was the network. And
yeah,
you're like, hey, I need a person for this. I need a person for this. And they had it. And, that for me is having a big network of people I can trust. And I think, the first person that comes to mind in real estate is, who's your lenders that you like to work with. But
mm-hmm.
as important in today's world, especially the changes in insurance, I mean, man, that insurance agent coming through and having things ready to go, not the day before closing
Yeah,
is so big. And, I think a lot of times it gets put on the back burner because you're like, oh, all I got to do is call, give them the address, get a quote, and that's what it's going to be. But, now when their insurance rates have gone up 100%,
mm-hmm.
and we're looking at, uninsurable roofs and all these different things that were not top of mind in the recent past. I mean, man, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's changing the strategy for real estate agents, right? Where it's if you're going to list a property and it has a 20-year-old roof, there is the potential that is no longer an insurable roof at replacement cost, which might mean that they don't qualify for loans on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that just limited your buying pool. And if as a realtor you're not up on that, you can put somebody in a bad situation. So that's where I'm actively going out and being like, hey, let us be a partner, let us help teach, let us be involved earlier on, because much better to have that happen, a day into the process than, like you said, that fire drill of hey, this guy said he could do it. Now we're
Yeah,
2 days
I've
from
gotten the
close.
call. Yeah.
Rich, save us. And we happily do that. But I would rather say hey, you just went under contract, get a hold of Rich. Here's a text introduction. We do it all. And I can tell you the bad news on the front end if it's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Or we have it sorted out. We know, hey, here's where the price point comes. It helps your mortgage team because they're not done with all their loan stuff. So, yeah, I am huge on that piece of the sooner we can be involved, especially in today's climate, especially in, the Iowa and Nebraska markets because they are so tough. Minnesota, too. They're even worse, actually. it's just a benefit to everybody. So
So back to your coffees, doing nearly 2 a day.
yeah.
Is there any of them that really stuck out to you? Like, was there any like pivotal moments when you met with somebody and you're like, you just saw things clear, something made sense to you?
Yeah, I think probably like it's such a small thing, but one of the most impactful things for my business. There's a local group here, Key Mortgage Group, in Des Moines. They're awesome, and they were one of the first people that really pushed on me. That was like value over cost, value over cost. We are not going to be the cheapest, but we are going to nail this client experience thing. And prior to that, everybody I had met with, like, I mean, I didn't know anything yet, was like, well, I've got a guy and he does it really cheap. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know, maybe I can figure out how to do it cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were the first ones to be like, no, like, we will not be the cheapest on rate, but we can guarantee you this experience is going to be immaculate. People are willing to pay for it and they're willing to, you know, do all these things to be involved in this experience. And I was like, man, that's what I want. Like I'm not here just to get the cheapest clients or whatever because that just creates this like unstable foundation. And
Yeah.
I remember hearing that and just I knew these guys were successful. I just saw the Google reviews and whatever and I was like, I got to like really dive into that. And so that was kind of that first thing for me where I was like, okay, they're having a different conversation than anybody I've sat down with. And, they were transparent. They're like, look, we have plenty of real estate agents that go, nope, we can go to a credit union. It feels like a win because it's cheap. And, but that's just not how we roll. And maybe they're not a good fit and that's okay. And so they had like learned the ability to say no. And so that was just like a small seed that was planted that now today has really, really evolved into kind of the core of how I look at things. And I mean, I'll filter call-ins the same way. Or if I get a call from somebody and they say, "Hey, I'm looking for a quote for my home and auto insurance," I go, "All right, perfect. What's important to you? If you just want it as cheap as you can possibly get it, I'm probably not your person
Yeah.
because I'm only willing to go so low on things because at the end of the day, I got to be able to sleep at night knowing you're taken care of." And probably 1 in 3 people goes, "Yeah, honestly, I just need it as cheap as it can possibly go." And I go, "Perfect.
Yeah.
Go online, quote it through Allstate, quote it through Progressive." You'll get it as cheap as you can, but in the event something happens, it might not be great.
Well, and if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. I mean,
Totally.
it's pretty
Yeah, I
simple.
mean, anybody who's 30% under the market rate, there's a
Mm-hmm.
reason, right? They're either
Mm-hmm.
not paying claims, they don't have a ton of business, there's something there.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been so good for me. And I look at my retention now, my retention is close to 100%. And that's because those people who have signed up with us are doing it because they trust us, they feel educated, and they've bought into the value that we're providing versus just cost.
Yeah.
So that's not to say like there are plenty of times where we are the best price for them, but we don't sacrifice coverage to do it. So, I think just from like I don't know, from like a mental capacity, like any professional for you, you could very easily be like, hey, I'll do your listing for 0.5%. And I bet you would
Yeah.
all of them, but it's like,
Yeah.
you got to value yourself and you got to value your time. And, being the cheapest definitely doesn't mean being the best. Um,
No, I
so,
mean, it's, and as you're, I'm sure, well aware, our industry has changed a lot in the last year, and I still see things happening really the same way that they did, but there's definitely a different conversation that's had, and showing people where the value is. Um, my dad has been in the industry a long time, and one thing, he's always been a value guy, and preached like, hey, we're going to get this money back through negotiation, we're going to get it back through a lot of other things, and you're going to be ahead. But kind of the one line that has always stuck with me is like, if I'm willing to give up my money, what would I do with yours?
yep.
And it's like, I don't really like saying that to somebody, but it's the message. It's like, I'm valuing my time and my effort and my capability, and I know that I can make this right for you. And I'm like, if somebody's willing to come in here and do it for less, you're probably not going to get the same service. I mean, why would you? So
Yep.
it's a pretty, I have no problem having that conversation. And the people that really fight that, in my experience, are usually not a good fit as a client anyway. There's usually
Right.
something, that's not gonna work for us, in
Right.
the long run. And so it's usually pretty easy to find out.
Yeah. And I think there is a place and a time. Like when you're brand new, you will do anything just to keep the lights
Yeah.
on. And like that's okay.
Yeah.
I had plenty of clients I wrote in my first 6 months where it was like, dude, I walked away from a career, like a great career with a wife and a daughter and another one coming. And it was like,
Yeah.
I
I got to
got
do
bills to
something.
pay. Things didn't go away just because I took
Yeah.
this leap of faith. So, I try not to like shame people in the beginning of their career
Yes.
because like you have to do it. It's a necessary evil to get off the ground. But the faster you can get to the point where you can learn to say no and
Yeah.
really lean into your value and truly believe in it, that's when your career takes off. So, and
It's
like
hard
kind
to
of what you
do.
said, it's very hard to do. But
Hmm.
we talked about kind of being that quarterback for your clients is such a crucial thing. And it's one thing specifically in real estate agents that I think they miss out on a big opportunity to do. So we talked about my prior real estate agent. She introduced me to my insurance people, my mortgage people, all of my contractors. I mean, my attorney, you name it. And that was
Yeah.
why I stuck with her. Like, honestly, when it came to like, I didn't care if she was going to post it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Cause like realistically, how many buyers were going to come from that? Probably not that many. Most of them were the
Yeah.
MLS. But where that true value was created is all these important people in my life. She was the glue, the person that connected me to them. So I think that's something a ton of professionals miss out on. So for us, that's one thing we're actually working with a videographer to go through and redo our whole drip campaign once clients come on board, to make sure that we're insisting we make introductions. So
Yeah.
what that looks like for us is, we sign you up, you're a client. Somewhere in the next 3 months, you're going to get a video that says, hey, if these people in your world are not a 10 out of 10, you need to shoot us a response so we can make an introduction. We want to make sure real estate, mortgage lenders, commercial bankers, attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, all of that. And on the flip side, we're going to say if they are a 10 out of 10, I want to meet them.
Yeah.
So it's a
Good
win-win
point.
for that.
Yeah.
And it's real. I mean, it's just allowed us to create really sticky clients because at the end of the day, they're like, look, my insurance went up $50, but Rich introduced me to every important person in my financial team. Like, we
Worth
can't
it.
replace that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about like Instagram and Facebook. I mean, obviously in today's world, the online marketing is a huge part. But one thing that I've been using, like in appointments, listing appointments and stuff, is I'm part of a pretty big networking group in Council Bluffs, and it's all business owners, and it's a pretty wide variety of people.
yeah,
And one thing I talk about is like, hey, I'm going to share this, obviously on my social media platforms. But one thing that I got going for me is all those people that are in that networking group are going to share it too.
yeah,
And then I also tell them in person when we meet on a weekly basis.
yep,
And it's just, it's small town Iowa, really.
yeah,
And Omaha is no different. It's like
mm-hmm.
all it takes is 25 people that are well connected, and
Yep,
suddenly it's out there.
yeah,
And so, it's kind of I really pride myself on kind of like a new school and old school mix of like
yeah,
marketing and sales is like, hey, I'm going to give you old school customer service. We're going to do some old school marketing techniques that have
yeah,
always worked, but we're also going to do the new stuff like video, professional,
yeah.
obviously professional photography these days, but all the new stuff,
The cell phone pictures aren't quite cutting it.
I'm telling you what,
You got to
if
thumb in
I
the
lose
picture
my
before.
mind when I see that. There's
So
too many
good.
people. I'm like, for what it costs to get a professional photographer in, I'm like, please just
No
do it.
brainer.
Oh man, I see way too many of them. The worst ones are when there's actually people in the background. I've seen quite a
Yeah.
bit of those, but
Like animals.
yeah, a guy sleeping on the couch.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. You're like this was a FISBO maybe.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like what I always say to people. I see these people for sale by owner. Typically, they're overpriced.
Yep.
But I'm like, man, do yourself a favor. Like the pictures that you have are just horrible. And I'm
Yep.
like, even if you're already overpriced, but then on top of that, it's like I tell people, I'm like, I'll give you some advice and you can try that advice. And like, maybe if I give you that advice, you try it and it doesn't work, like, let's have a conversation at least, because
Yep.
I commend people that are trying to do it themselves. But it's just like, it's like everybody, it's like, I don't do my own taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I trust my insurance agent. I trust my financial advisor to help me make better decisions. It's no different here.
Yep. Yeah. And I think so that conversation, I've taught a handful of classes, whether it be to like mortgage teams, whether it be to real estate teams, whatever. That ability
Hmm.
to articulate almost that like challenge that you're saying there, I think is so
Yeah.
good. So the example I always end the class with when I do those is I'll use a real estate agent for example, where I'll say, okay, you got real estate agent A who sells 100 houses a year. He crushes it, right?
Hmm.
You got real estate agent B. He only sells 50, so he sells half as many houses. When they go under contract, the guy who sells 100 houses shoots out an email that says, hey, here's my 3 lenders, here's my 3 insurance agents. Maybe there's a mention of a financial advisor, whatever. And then he lets his clients do it. He goes, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm getting paid. You can use whoever you want. We'll just get the deal across the finish line. Guy in option B has a process built out where he says, hey, client, we just closed. I know you're really excited about this. You probably know somebody, but here's the deal. I do 50 of these transactions a year. If you have somebody, that's totally fine. Have a conversation with them, but I insist you at least have a conversation with my person because I know they're the best of the best. I'm going to make an
Yep.
introduction via text to my mortgage guy and to my insurance agent. And if you have 2 or 3 of them, totally fine. You just
Hmm.
rotate. You think who's a better fit for my client, whatever. And you go and you make that introduction via text after a conversation on the phone call. It took you 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You always ask the room, I go, okay, what percent of clients do you think use that 100 deal a year real estate agents people for both of those? What percentage? Most of them come back and say, I don't know, maybe 10, 15%.
Hmm.
Okay, the guy who insisted you had a conversation called you about it and then introduced him over a text. How many at-bats do you think you got your person? 90%?
Yeah, it is.
5%?
I'm always telling myself that, I'm always trying to learn and be better. And it's like, I have to remind myself so many times, like that it takes follow up and it takes just a commitment to it. Like telling someone one time, even though it seems like a no brainer to me, it's
Yep.
like, I have to really preach that in order for someone to make that step to do
Right.
it.
Well,
And
I
it's
don't
like,
think they realize, like, when you can say, like, hey, I do this many deals a year. I see them go good. I see them go bad.
yeah,
And consistently with my person, they go really well. So
yeah,
have the conversation. They're not going to say no. And then the other thing is like, I know everybody gets weird about like, oh, well, I can't just have one guy. You don't have to just send every deal to one guy. You can send it to
yeah,
3 different people or whatever. But guess what? If you're referring out 90% of 50 deals, you are way more valuable to all of those lenders, all of those real estate agents than the guy who does 100 deals and barely ever connects the dots. Right.
you nailed it
So,
there.
so
Yep.
when reciprocity, that's a real thing in this world, when that starts to happen, they're going to go, that dude introduces me on a text message every time and has a conversation with his
Yeah.
clients. Like, I got to find a way to help him out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's free. Like it's free to like share your knowledge, and clients want you to be the expert. So why not? You
Yeah.
say like, well, my Uncle Joe's brother-in-law, who we lived with in high school, he does insurance. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. My
What's
mom and
that?
dad use them.
Yeah, like, what do you know about him? Have you ever
Yeah.
asked your mom and dad? Have they ever taken a look? Because a lot of times when we quote the moms and dads who've been somewhere for 20 years, it's a terrible policy, or they're getting taken advantage of because the guy just doesn't
Yeah.
review anything. And it's
Yep.
I just encourage people, do your due diligence.
So in insurance right now, what are you seeing? What are some of the struggles that you're dealing with, and what should people be aware of? Especially on the real estate side when it comes to homeowners insurance and even like business insurance.
Yeah. So, I mean, inevitably for anything property, it doesn't matter if you own an apartment complex, it doesn't matter if you own a manufacturing facility, if you're a first time home buyer, whatever, the market is going up. People are paying more. So, the reason why this is happening is just because the losses have been so great over the last 5 years. So, um, IMT, for example, it's a huge insurance company. It's based out of Des Moines. They've been around since like 1890 or something like that. they've had like 9 of their 10 largest loss storms in the last like 5 years. So the severity of storms has gone way up. The frequency of storms has gone way up. Obviously, Omaha takes it every year in hail. This year they had the big tornado.
Mm-hmm.
So these things continuing to happen are what's influencing it. And then you had from COVID, cost of materials went way up, cost of labor went way up, supply chain got changed a lot where it just takes longer to get things. So all of that raised the costs. The other piece we saw is litigation is way up. So, I mean, you see the trucker signs that are like, hey, have you ever been in a car accident? Call me, we'll sue them.
Yeah.
And so what used to be a fender bender where you shook hands and they gave you $1,000 is now like, my neck's going to hurt forever. I need $300,000.
Yeah.
And the insurance companies eat that. But staying in line with the property side of things, we've been fortunate in the Midwest historically to have pretty inexpensive insurance. But as the hail belt and wind belts have shifted over us, we're starting to play catch up. So if you look at like markets like Minneapolis, places like that, they're way ahead of us where they pay twice as much as we pay, but we're quickly catching up. So what that looks like, obviously premiums are going up because that's a way for the insurance companies to start to make up for some of these losses where they can get back to being profitable. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to raise deductibles, which just says, if you're on the hook for more out of pocket, you're less likely to file a claim. So we're not going to file little claims. So specifically when it comes to roofs and stuff like that, a lot of the Midwest, the strategy has always been like, well, we'll wait for hail, and that's how we get it. Like nobody plans to set aside money to buy a new roof. It was just like at some point it's going to hail and we'll get one.
Yeah.
Right. But the only community that ever looked at it that way was some of like the investor community where they go, okay, well, I'm setting aside 10% for CapEx because I know it's going to happen at some point and I'll need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now it's almost like we almost have to teach the standard homebuyer to be like, hey, you need to be setting aside money every month to deal with these things so you don't get caught with your pants down. And so we're seeing, I mean, we've seen it specifically on the commercial side. Apartment complexes are now on all percentage wind hail deductibles. So if you own, a 100-unit apartment complex, it's a $10 million building, your deductible might be 5% of $10 million. Which is huge. So again, this encourages that like more like financially responsible approach to home ownership, building ownership, whatever, where you're going to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
And then as you're purchasing it, things that are really going to impact price, a huge one is the roof age, where, whether you're listing it or whether you're looking at buying it, you need to know because that's a fairly substantial expense getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really going to impact your insurability and like what that looks like monthly for you. So, ideally you're under 15 years, you start getting over 20 years. That's something where if I'm looking to buy a house, I'm going to say like, hey, this is a part of the deal. This roof needs to be replaced before I purchase it because it's going to throw off everything and potentially get you to the point where it's not insurable. Like if it's not in good shape and it's over 20 years old, you may not be getting an insurance policy that covers replacement cost, and then you might not be able to get a loan. So
yeah. I mean, I've run into several of those. I mean, not usually people knowingly, they even had collected and not replaced their roof at some point. They had minor hail damage, and they're like, well, we can live with it. We got the check, and then here we are 4 years later going to sell our house. And I'm like, well, we got to disclose that. And it's broken some deals because of, the cost of having to replace a roof. And I've seen exactly what you're talking about, even personally, like owning some rental properties and even on my personal home, it's like, okay, you have a claim. It's like, okay, well, I don't have $1,000 deductible anymore. So let's really look at, is it worth it? If I'm going to have to pay a $5,000 deductible to get, a couple $1,000s in work done is probably not worth it anymore.
Yeah, totally. And we encourage our clients before you file claims, things like that, call a roofer, have a roofer come look at it and actually give you an opinion. Find a reputable enough roofer that's not just going to say anytime I show up, yes, it needs.
You got a roof,
yeah. So I've built out a pretty good network of them where I trust them, where they're the first ones to say like, hey, your roof's in good shape. Don't file a claim because once you file a claim, it's also impacting you substantially more than it ever has. Where if you get a couple claims within 5 years, there are a lot of carriers that are going to drop you, and it's going to be really hard to get
Yeah.
new insurance. So we have to be a lot more responsible in guiding our clients surrounding claims and when they should and shouldn't do them. So, but again, that falls back on that education piece that we're so heavy on, is like, you need to be able to trust us and rely on us to be your advocates and advisors when it comes to this, versus just the, hey, I emailed you a quote, talk to you when it renews, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the original way this market was designed. So
Yeah. Yeah. What's something that, I mean, we really talked about a lot of these things, but what's something that you wish more people understood about insurance?
yeah, I mean, I think it's such a commoditized industry is the biggest challenge, where I just wish people had a basic understanding of what the coverages meant, right? I mean, I deal with, you saw my Instagram title, a lot of my clients are these luxury home buyers, homeowners that have $4, $5, $6 million properties, and they might be driving around on state minimums because they built it online and have no idea. So, maybe has a net worth of $10 million, $15 million, but if they get in a car accident, their insurance covers them for 25 grand.
Yeah.
And everything else comes out of pocket, and they've got all these assets that are on the table. And it's like, you could have spent an extra $150 a month and protected everything you built, and you didn't, because you thought you were getting a steal, right? So that's why we're so adamant. Like, one piece of our process, doesn't matter if you're on the commercial side or if you're on the personal line side, you get a video and it walks you through the quote line by line, so that you actually understand what scenarios these coverages are used, what they mean, why we recommend them, what's optional. And we'll make you tell us you want it off of there, versus being like, hey, I'm going to be the cheapest guy here, and I'll just email you a quote. And then, if 3 or 4 people do that, all they do is they go, okay, which the one number on here I understand? It's the price. But then it hails and they go, holy crap, I had a 3% deductible. I don't have 15 grand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just wish people sometimes in the insurance space would slow down. And I think, our industry does it to ourselves, where it's become like any industry that's sales based, is people want to make money, so they'll cut corners to be the cheapest, but that encourages people not to actually pay attention to the things that matter, that protect them. So
yeah, I tell you, I'm in it, and I deal with it a lot. And it's even sometimes for me, it can be overwhelming. And so it's like, I just had a conversation with a CPA the other day, and like, taxes, it's like, for me, sometimes it's like in one ear, out the other. And it's like, you start talking about price, and they're like, well, look, we can help you do this, this, and this, but this is our price in order to do so. Or you can say, hey, I'm just going to give all my paperwork to this guy, and whatever happens, and I'm going to pay my taxes. And, he only costs $400 to do my taxes, so that's what I'm going to keep doing. It's like, to me, it's the same thing. It's like, hey, I need to really look at because you don't think about it until something bad happens.
Right.
And, insurance is the example of that. So I can definitely see how, people get 4 or 5 quotes. They look at it like, well, I'm sure they're quoting me all the same thing. This person, for some reason, is a little bit cheaper. So I'm going there.
Yeah. I mean, we are the first ones to see it, where it's like, I can guarantee you the company that we have that comes in the cheapest every time is not the best company we have when it comes to claims.
Yeah.
Right. So, I always try to level with my clients, where I'm like, at the end of the day, if it's like have high end insurance coverage or put food on the table, like, brother, feed your family. I'm not here to tell you got to have the the Rolls Royce of insurance when you're trying to barely get by. But if you're clearing $1 million a year and you have all these assets and all this liability, I don't care if it's $3,000 more a year. If it means the day your mansion burns down, you can get a check and walk away from it and aren't forced to rebuild it, and there was no limits on your coverage, like, that's worth it every time. Yeah. And you can't convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
And those are those people generally understand it once we have that conversation. They go, man, I don't know. That guy I talked to last year just told me it'd be cheaper if I did this. It's like.
And it's usually the people that can afford it anyway.
Yeah, totally. And I'm like, dude, you got $1 million wine collection in the basement. Like, not covered.
We need to start talking to the same people.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. I just try to do my piece in it. We give them as much education as they're willing to consume. And, usually in a 5-minute video, we can teach people more than they've ever known about insurance. So
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Rich. I really appreciate you coming on here today and giving some insight and getting to know you a little bit better. Hopefully we can connect in person either, in the Des Moines area or when you come back to Omaha at some
yeah,
point. So
absolutely. I've been
I'd love to
craving
do
some
that.
Oscar's wings, so I gotta
Oh yeah. There
gotta
you
get
go.
back out there, or maybe salty
There you go.
in Council Bluffs.
There you go. There you go. Well,
So,
thank you. I'm sure we'll be, hopefully we can do some business together here soon. And if nothing else, grab some wings.
yeah, for sure. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Rich.